So we just came back from a field trip. It was really exciting, and that was that precision spindle, and we got tremendous a number of comments on it. If you haven't seen the video, check it out because it's really a great field trip. The guys at Precision Spindle were awesome, and you'll really enjoy the field trip because it shows all about rebuilding the spindle. It was just great. But today we're going to take this particular part right here, and we're going to take it out and back. We're going to grind the ID in it. We do have another video out there about how to, I think it's called How to ID Grind Simplified. You ought to take a look at that first because that video actually talks about the machine, and this is the exact machine that we're going to be using when we go in the back. Now, the problem that we have in grinding this and checking the size is as follows. There's very little room in here between the wheel and our part, which will be in a 3-jaw chuck. So I can't get the bore gauge in there, which is what this is, because it's too long. So it's just not going to fit between there. So the challenge now becomes, how do we check it? I love the way we check it. Micrometer, telescoping gauge, and we have a setting ring, the same setting ring that we would use with the bore gauge. But what's exciting about this is that this is all about feel. It's all about technique. It's all about touch. And that's where I think the difference is between just an ordinary grinder hand and a special grinder hand. And it's not that hard to do, and I'm going to show you how to do it. It's all in the feel, folks, and you're going to love it. So let's head in the back, and let's go back and grind this little guy. And again, if we had 20 of these to do, we would do it a little differently than we would with one. And we'll talk about that when we come back up front. So let's go in the back, let's get set up, let me change my shirt, let's go. As you can see here, we're loading the part, and watch how I spin it just a little bit. I move it back and forth. You see how it's wiggling there? Now if I turn it and I gently, you can't see it at the top, but I'm tightening the chuck ever so little. And I was comfortable with that because I want to make sure that there was no rock in the part, that it was nice and square or parallel with the jaws of the chuck. So here we're going to check the face, and I want to make sure that we get that within a few tenths. And again, I didn't tighten the part. I'm not a big believer of cranking down on the chuck, and you'll see how little I tapped it and how quickly it was able to move, and we got it within 5/10. Why do I want to get it that close? Well, why not? I got an indicator on there anyway. What the heck's the difference? Now here, all I'm going to do is double check the ID to make sure that the part that I have was not out of tolerance, or let's say that wasn't concentric with the OD. And you can see there it's within less than 5/10, so I'm good with that. So we'll remove the indicator, and we're ready to go here. We're going to dress the wheel. And we don't need to take much off the wheel because I've used it before, so that wheel has already been pretty concentric. You saw that spark at the end there, and that was because there was some steel embedded in the grinding wheel, which is fine. Now I'm going in here to double check it to see how much stock I have to remove. And notice I didn't go in there twice, I only went in there one time. So we've got about 12 thousandths to remove. So I'm going to go in here and take a cut. First of all, I need to find where it's at. And we're feeding in, I'm feeding in gently, although you can't see it, I am feeding in here. And there we're touching. So I'm going to go all the way out to the end and feed in quite a little bit. You'll see we got a pretty good cut there. That's a few thousandths, I would think. Now at this point we are not what I call counting sparks. Sparks don't count at this point. What matters is how much I'm feeding in and how much stock I'm removing. At some point, counting sparks is going to be important. Now I'm going to turn the spindle off here because this is never a good thing to do, to have the spindle on while you're trying to check. You can easily run your hand into it. I've always been pretty safe. I mean, I have to admit, I have run my hand into the into the wheel before on the back side of my hand, but not doing it with a telescoping gauge. I did it with a plug gauge. You're trying to pull a plug out and you go, oh crap. So I'm double checking here to see how much stock I've got to remove, and I've got a little bit more to go. And I love using a telescoping gauge. Again, if you do it enough, it becomes pretty easy to develop a feel. But you know, you've got to have good mics. That's important. And you can kind of see the steel on the edge of the wheel. See where it's kind of shiny on the back side of that wheel? That's where you're doing the cutting. So the wheel that we're using is just a bit too hard, and that's never a good thing because it generates so much heat. And you'll see here that we're taking quite a bit of stock off there. When I say quite a bit, it's probably 3/4 thousandths per side. We're going to feed in a little bit more, take another cut. And again, the part's going to get pretty warm here because of this wheel that we're using, and now if you look at the wheel, let me see, next time we come out there, we'll take a look at it. I'm not worried about taper because I've already checked this machine out. And you may recall one of our other videos. Again, look at the back side of that wheel and see how it's kind of shiny? That's steel that's embedded in the wheel. I know this machine is straight, again, because earlier we put a cylinder in there. Ouch, that was kind of warm. So that baby got pretty hot. And I'm going to double check it again and watch once more. I'm just going to do it one time. There we go. That's all we need. And again, the spindle's off. Just a little bit more to go now. I love doing this. I really love using a micrometer, using a telescoping gauge. And folks, it's not that hard to develop that skill, believe me. It's all in the feel. And if you just think about it, when you're trying to hammer a railroad spike, you're not going to use a small ball peen hammer. You're going to use a sledgehammer or something substantial. But likewise, when you're trying to work on a watch, you don't want to use a sledgehammer on a watch. Now here, I'm pushing and pulling on. I'm actually pulling on the spindle because I only need to take out a few tenths. So I don't have to feed in. When you see these sparks right here, now we're counting sparks. That is counting sparks. And that's only a couple of tenths. I know it looks like a lot, but it's not. It's just a few tenths. And now I pushed it away because I didn't want it to drag out and leave what we call a tail. So by pushing the spindle away, it removes the possibility of having a tail there. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to dress the outside edge of the wheel to a point. So we're going to have a cone-shaped wheel inside there, and it doesn't take much. It's just a little bit of a touch. I'm pretty much convinced that I felt pretty good about being on size, but right now, watch how as I bump this, and you'll see, look at that. See, look how it's cleaning up. That's not as much as you think. That's probably only about 1/1000. And remember, when we put the indicator on there, we only saw about 5/10 of run out. So there we go. Nice. And why did I do the face? Well, I did the face because if I have to put that, if I take it out, and if I have to put it back in again, and I need to get it to run within a tenth or two, if I don't indicate that face, or have a good surface on that face to indicate, I can't possibly get it back in there and get it run through within a couple of tenths. Well, we went back in here and we're double checking that. And it looks like we've got a little bit more to take out. So we're going to go back in there again, and it's not that hard to do. I'm going to feed in to where I just barely touch it. And now look at that. I'm going to pull on it. I'm pulling on it to take that few extra tenths out of there. And again, that's counting the sparks. Now watch when I remove it, I'm going to push it away. I guess I didn't like that. I think I felt I had to take a few more tenths out of there. Now I'm pushing it away. Again, so we don't leave a tail on the part. Very important that you do that. Believe it or not, you can push a couple of tenths with a spindle, even though it looks like it's a solid machine. It's easy to do. So we'll go back in and double check it one more time. And again, only one time, that's it. Done. You don't go back in a second time. I cannot emphasize that enough. The chance of you getting it in there the second time and getting it exactly on center line is next to impossible. So, the part feels a little bit warm. So, because it's warm, I believe that it expanded and I'm getting it, while it looks like it's on size, I don't believe it's on size. I believe that it's going to shrink when it cools off. So I'm going to do it again. Now I'm going to push away, so we don't leave a tail when we're trying to come off of it. Right there. I think I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm saying that's good. So we'll take the part out. And again, it's a tad warm, but you know, when you're experienced like that, you know that if you take it a couple of tenths oversized, let's say, that it will come in, it'll shrink when it cools down, it'll be within your size that you want. So we'll double check it, but it's starting to cool off now. And you know, when we did the serious grinding, the serious stock removal, the part got pretty warm, but here we are, we gave it plenty of time to cool down, so I'm pretty good with it. So here we're showing that baby's right on size with the ring gauge. We just proved it there with the ring gauge. We set the bore gauge. Now we'll check the part. And there you go. We're right on size. We're right on the money, as they say. Isn't that beautiful? God, I love doing that. That's really cool. Well, as you saw, everything that we did to grind this and measure it was done with a telescoping gauge and a micrometer, and we double checked it with a bore gauge and a setting ring. Now, that's all about touch and feel, and you can develop that over a period of time, but you have to start with a good set of mics that you know are accurate. And again, I don't loan my mics out. When I was in the shop, I didn't loan them out to anybody, because if I did, I never knew if they banged them or if they're going to abuse them somehow. So if you really want to work within a tenth or two, you can do it. But again, you can't loan your mic. I don't recommend just loaning your mics out. I had a spare set that I loaned out if somebody wanted to borrow a set of mics. But these were my babies, and I can read these within a tenth all day long, and it's not that hard to do. But I want to talk about the wheel. We had some challenges in grinding this part because this wheel was too hard. And why was it too hard? Well, the spindle speed is not adjustable. We didn't have a pulley to reduce the speed. So the wheel gets harder if the RPM goes up, because you have more surface feet per minute. That tends to make the wheel react harder. If I were grinding 20 parts of these or so, or 10, I would have stopped and either found another wheel or send somebody to the store to get another wheel that's softer than this. That's what I would have done. Once you do that, the technique for grinding an ID is no different than it is with an OD grinder or a surface grinder. Take a look at that video that we have that says how to grind fast and accurate on the surface grinder. That technique is simply to go off the part at one end, feed in 10, 12 thousandths, whatever it is, and come in and work your way out and let the edge of the wheel do the cutting. If you use the surface of the wheel, that is by plunging, what happens when you're plunging is that this whole wheel gets dull. Now, if you don't believe me, here's what you do. Take a piece of steel that's scrap and go in here and touch the wheel, and you'll feel how smooth it is. Now go over here in a corner and touch it and watch how it cuts. There's a tremendous difference on the corners because that's where the work should be done. Believe me, that's where you want the work to be done, this corner or this corner. And then you work your way out. The wheel breaks down on an as-needed basis, and the little alundums right behind it stay sharp and do all the work. That's the idea of having the right wheel. But again, for a 1-up, which is what we had here, we didn't have the right wheel. And if you'll take a look at this spindle, or this quill rather, Jim, can you get the brown, can you see that brown in there? That brown that you see in there is because this wheel got hot. So did the part. So I was able to let it cool down. I let the part cool down, and I was able to work with it. But if I had a lot of parts to do, I would not do that. I would, again, get the correct wheel. So to give you an idea, and I think you guys saw it out there, but if you look at our setting gauge here, we've got it on 0. We take our part and work it around just a bit. Well, we're showing it's within a tenth there, 2/10, a tenth. Let me get a good reading here because it's within a tenth. Actually, it depends where you check it at. You know, it's hard for the bore gauge to settle down, but we're certainly within a tenth. There it's right at 0. So we know that this part was within a couple of tenths. And again, folks, we did that with a telescoping gauge. And it's so easy to do. I just want to reiterate, if you use telescoping gauges, you can't crank the knob way down. You got to, and you can't leave it too loose. It's got to be just right. This is all about feel. So I go back and forth like this, and then I kind of feel it and just give it a little snug. Now I come in here with my part and snug it up the same amount. Then I take my mics and I make sure that they're clean. Come in here and give it a check. And I'm right there. Right where a size is supposed to be. It's not that hard to do. One thing, if you use a telescoping gauge and you set it once, do not be tempted to go in and do it again. In other words, you can't go in once and then go back again twice. The chances of you finding that center line, that the largest part of the diameter a second time, is almost impossible. You do it one time. If you need to go in again, reset it, remove it, reset it, go back in, and do it again. But don't try to do it twice with one setting. It's not going to work. Lastly, I bumped this face out there. Remember when I did that, Jim? And the reason I did that, I came in here with this wheel and I bumped this face just like that. Why did I do that? First of all, I had stock on there, so it didn't matter. But the real reason I did it is, let's say that for some reason I pulled this out of the machine and it was undersized by 2 or 3 or 4 tenths. If I have to go back into the machine and take out a couple of tenths, I can do it because we've got, remember we got the adjustable chuck? Remember the chuck has the screws on it right here, so we can move the chuck around and get it concentric. But what about the face? If I had this in here and it was like this, then there's no way I could take a couple tenths out. So by touching the face, I can put an indicator on it. If I have to go back in and do it again and get this on 0, adjust the chuck to get it on 0 this way, I can take out 2 or 3 tenths if I have to. Couldn't do that if I didn't bump this face. That's why, from my view, as long as there's stock on there, it's important and critical that you touch the face. And what does it take? It takes a couple seconds to do that. Besides, it looks pretty. So that's how you do it. That's how you finesse a couple of tenths in an ID grinder. And it was a lot of fun. I love doing that. And, you know, I don't spend enough, I haven't been in a shop in years, so with the exception of these few videos that we've been doing. So, but I still haven't lost my touch, and I love doing it. It's a lot of fun for me, and I'm glad to get out there and do it and to share with everybody out there. So, by the way, we've got some upcoming videos. We have another field trip coming up that I know you're going to love. You're going to be excited about seeing it. And I think it's on investment casting. Is that right, Jim? Is that where we're going? Right. All right, so it's on investment casting. Stay tuned. You're going to love that video. It's another one of our field trips. I think this is number 4, number 5, and we have many more coming up. So again, thanks for watching.